to all our viewers who are joining us on television. Some of you are joining us on radio, and of course some of you are joining us on social media, on Facebook, on various pages which you use to access our live feed. Good evening, everyone. This is the Thursday agenda. Before we get started, it might be useful for some of our viewers if you share the link so that more persons may be able to join us and more people may be able to participate. As much as possible, what I will endeavor to do, if time permits, is to try to respond to some of the suggestions or questions that you may have. On our agenda today, high on our agenda today is legislation. Legislation to reform and to make our electoral laws better. It is important that we do so. It is important, right now there is ongoing public consultations and there are ongoing presentations around the country that relate to this issue. Everyone should participate in it. Everyone should make an effort to be aware of the amendments that are proposed, and you should let your voice be heard as to what you would like to see in amendments and what you would like to see in our laws. It is, after all, for the election process, and it is to make sure that the election process goes as smoothly as possible and that it is as fair and transparent as it can possibly be. So the easy starting point to this is we have a proposed bill to amend the National Registration Act. Now, I wouldn't go through with you all of the details of each section, but I will tell you this. You've been hearing around, there's been chatter from the keyboard puppet in New York to opposition leaders and others about registration and national registration and what it is. We understand this very, very simple. By the Constitution of Guyana, you only need two things to be registered to vote. You need to be a Guyanese citizen and you need to have been registered on the voters list. Two things. There is no requirement, there is no provision in the Constitution that says you have to live here. There is no residency requirement. Now, it is important that you understand the Constitution is supreme. And like most things in the Constitution, a 2/3 majority in Parliament is required before you can change it, which means 2/3 of the members of Parliament must vote in favor of that change. But we need to dial that back slightly. This position of registration and what takes place in registration is also we have a National Registration Act which relates to how it takes place. Now, there could be nothing in the Act that does not agree with the Constitution. Now, if the Constitution have only two requirements, you can't add the requirements into the legislation. The legislation is referred to by lawyers as the enabling legislation. Means it enables the provision in the Constitution. But we can't enable in the legislation, in the Act, that or we can't provide for in the Act that which is not contained in the Constitution. The Constitution put two requirements. The Act can have no more than that. Anything that the Act would do to impose a restriction or a condition in excess of what is set out in the Constitution is unconstitutional and void. Now, there was a case a long time ago. Some of you may know Esther Pereira. The Esther Pereira election petition, which was presided over by then Justice Claudette Singh, now the chairman of the Elections Commission. The issue then was you had to have a voter ID card to vote. So in addition to your ID card, your national ID card, a special card was produced, which was a voter ID card. So to vote, you had to have the voter's ID card. The court then rightly ruled that the requirement that a voter has an ID card, a voter ID card, excuse me, was more than required by the Constitution. Constitution said citizen and on the list. Didn't say you needed to have anything else. You didn't need to have a special ID card to vote. You only needed to be a citizen. Now, you need, when you go to the polling station in the ordinary circumstance, you need to identify yourself. You can do that with your passport, with your national ID card, or you can take an oath in some circumstances. All of that is provided for. But there is no requirement that you have a voter ID card. As a result, it was said that that was an unlawful imposition. Justice George, in one of the cases brought by Mr. Ram, pronounced upon it. This would have been in 2018 or 19. It was pronounced upon very clearly that the Constitution is it. Nothing beyond the Constitution can be imposed. So when you hear all of these persons yapping on about you must have requirements of residency and the foolishness that went on in the last elections where the agencies of the state were manipulated into giving reports about persons who had traveled or who were supposedly not in Guyana, all of that, or who had just returned to Guyana, residency was irrelevant. Now, let's put aside for a minute that those reports where the arms of the state were essentially used in a manner that it should never be used. Put that aside for a minute. All that was required was that the person voting be present in Guyana on election day and go and vote. Once he was a Guyanese citizen and he had registered, that was a process that took place before election day. On election day, he needed to be present and to go and vote. There could be no other requirement. Now understand this, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a Constitutional Reform Commission. It's a part of one of the parliamentary subcommittees. There is legislation presently that will come up when Parliament returns from the break to formulate that commission, to populate that commission so that all constitutional matters can be considered, and the proposed amendments will then go to the Parliament and there will be a vote by the House. If 2/3 of the House votes to change those simple requirements, then it will change. If that doesn't happen, it wouldn't change. Now, you have to understand, this government is trying to do what it promised it will do. It will reform electoral laws, but you can't reform electoral laws in a manner that is beyond your control. Your control lies to a majority, which is simple legislation. You cannot amend the Constitution. The government does not have 2/3 of the House. So that can't be a situation that could be contemplated without the involvement of the other political parties. But that is what the Constitutional Commission is for, to consider the various articles of the Constitution that you would like to see amended. So that's a separate process. But we can't sit at the same time and wait for that to happen while we don't do anything now. And what is being changed about registration are very simple and straightforward matters, in that you want to have the creation of some offenses under the legislation. So if you are doing what you should not be doing, and you're misleading, you're trying to mislead, the public officials are not doing their job in terms of registering you, then offenses are created. But understand this, the registration process is by and large a process that is very straightforward. You go to the registration center. Guyana now does continuous registration. There is no legal power in any agency to simply discard the electoral roll. The electoral roll is designed so that it is constantly being updated. And there is now statutory underpinning about things to do with debts. So when there is now a formal part where the registrar of debts, births and debts, will send reports on a fixed period of time, that is proposed in legislation, monthly reports, quarterly reports, whatever it will end up to be, to GCOM. GCOM controls the database, and GCOM will take those names, they will see the death certificates for those people, and they will make the necessary adjustment on the list. So it is only if you have a death certificate that you could be removed from the list. You can't be removed because your residency is not in Guyana. You can't be removed because you've moved to live from Campbellville and you're now living in Republic Park. You can't be removed for those reasons. Understand that clearly. But what the bill seeks to do is to try to take account of some of the things that ordinary legislation can address. You can't just take people's names off the register. Now, that is what would happen if we took this register, we threw it away, and we started again a whole fresh new register. How could that be right? What about those citizens that have already registered and they've gone through the process of being registered? Some might not be here in Guyana, but the Constitution provides for that. So we changed our system since the early 2000s to one of continuous registration. Registration is an ongoing process, takes place all the time. So it is total nonsense for those in opposition who say they want a whole list to be done. Why would you want a whole list to be done? Why would you want to disenfranchise people? Why would you want to make it difficult for people to exercise their franchise? Why would you want to do that? There is a list in place. That list has been through all of the last 3 elections and local government elections. Why would you want to interfere with it? There is no logical, reasonable reason for that. And you cannot lightly take away people's rights. That was not right. So understand that the only thing you have to be is Guyanese and on the list. Nothing else. There is provision that if you are a Commonwealth citizen living for a certain amount of time in Guyana, that you could be registered. That is also true. But the general principle is, once you've been registered on the list, you remain on the list. There is no provision to take you off on the basis of residency. And that entire argument is a red herring. And these are the laws. This is the Constitution. We must abide until it is changed. We can't say that we will not participate, if that would be, that's what I heard in some quarters, until there is a new list. The law doesn't provide for a new list. The law provides for continuous registration. So that's the easy amendment that is coming. And just so that I cover a little bit by way of trying to bring to you as much information as I can about what's going on in the other piece of legislation. So the other legislation that is being proposed is, and is being circulated for public discussion now, is a bill that relates to the Representation of the People's Act. Now, we all witnessed in utter horror what transpired in the 2020 elections. The legislative scheme now is to try to eliminate as much as possible what was in the legislation by clear express words. So, for example, when Mingo was with a spreadsheet and a bed sheet, that was not permitted by law. You have to show the statement of polls. But the law says what you can do is you can take the statement of polls, you could show it to the people, you could put it, and you can project it onto a screen. But it must be the statement of polls. In many places, they would have a device that would simply take what is on the table and put it on, magnify it. The courts in the Caribbean Court of Justice, they use it. So you could, but you can't take a tabule, you can't take anything, in fact. Let us start there. Nothing but the SOPs must be produced to all and sundry in the room when you are doing your count. That's the first thing. The next thing is, when you, one of the troublesome things that happened, and this, you're saying that we must transmit these SOPs to the central counting center for the region. Now, you may or may not know that Region 4 is divided into 4 areas: East Bank, North and South Georgetown, and East Coast. Those are the 4 areas. And in the last election, for example, they were all at the Ashman's building. Now, the legislation provides that you should have them, the 4 areas would be in 4 different locations. So, and they must each have a person in the position, like there was Mingo, a returning officer, to address what comes in. It is an obligation now that the SOPs be published on a website, and I know that there has been some comment about that, but it is a public document and it must be published on the website. And now you have to understand, at the place of poll, every observer, party observer, scrutineer, will have a copy of the SOP. One is put on the door, so any member of the public can see it. Then we go further, and one is delivered to the returning officer, and one is delivered to GCOM, the CEO, Chief Elections Officer. And now what the provision is that the commission will also have one. So if somebody tries to mischievously put the wrong numbers and SOP online for the world to see, there's so many other persons who would have and say, look, you made a mistake. That's not the correct SOP. This is what it was. So what it is designed to do is to put into the public domain as quickly as possible all of the SOPs. Now, there's complaints that, or there was comment at the national consultation that the whole process in the outlying areas it might be too slow in Region 7, but Region 7 was finished counting. It was Region 4 that took 5 months. So to say that the people in Region 7 need more or are not efficient is totally incorrect. Absolutely incorrect. They were carrying it perhaps on the back, a horseback, to where it had to be, and it still got where it should have gotten before taking it from somewhere on the East Coast and bringing it to Georgetown, and taking it on the East Bank to Georgetown. It still was quicker on that horseback. So that's not a valid complaint, put simply. But all of the horrors that we witnessed, the legislation is designed to remove those and to impose penalties for anyone who knowingly were to break the rules. There must be fines and imprisonment. So that's what's provided for the legislation. So if we take a little step back and we go through what were the issues. The main issue was the use of spreadsheets and not the statement of polls. In the law now, there is a mandatory requirement that the statement of polls be produced. That's the only thing. There is no ambiguity to allow anything else. It also provides that the statement of polls must be published on GCOM's website. Now, this is in addition to it being on the door of every polling station and it being in the possession of every scrutineer. It must now be published on GCOM's official website. In relation to the time within which it is to be done, there is a stipulation. Within a certain time of it being received, it must be put up. Now that is designed to cater for the initial things that were problematic in 2020. We then have, additionally, requirements now as to what must take place in the counting. We've separated out. Region 4 is separated. There is the intention to do the same in Region 3 and Region 6, which are the larger population centers. There is also a provision that is now being made that we should have penalties upon conviction of fines in the region of $5 and $10 million and imprisonment for a number of years up to 10. Now, when we look at the troublesome areas that happened in the last election, we had these issues about all of these discretions that were being exercised by the then chief elections officer in determining what votes cast, the total number of votes, all of these things, which are plain, simple language. But now it is made even clearer. It means valid votes, it means number of total valid votes cast, it means that all of the creative interpretations that are being put cannot now be maintained. Now, I want to encourage you, and I will on a weekly basis try to do summaries of the various bits of the legislation that is being the proposed amendments until the amendments come up in Parliament, so that you all could have an idea that these are the amendments that are being proposed. And the amendments are really directed to a lot of what was experienced in 2020. But as the Attorney General had said in the public consultations, it's also to bring the laws from various pieces of legislation into one piece of legislation. And it now allows for easier reference as to where the laws are located. Because what has happened, after every election in Guyana, there have been amendments. But there's never been a compilation of those amendments. These amendments that we have now will do so. So all of the amendments will be placed into one place. It will be for easier reference for all concerned. Now, I want to encourage everyone, especially the organizations the civic organizations that have some interest, to get involved, get copies of what the proposed amendments are, and write in if necessary to GCOM or anywhere you feel comfortable, and express your views. But you gotta understand that we live in a democratic country. So one man's view is not superior to another's. And you might not get your own way about everything you want. It has to be the consensus position is always what will go forward. And we must respect each other's opinions. But what I will try to do every week is to, in summary, raise different portions of what's going to go on with the amendment. But I encourage everyone to bring their views into the public domain, and do so constructively. You might attend public forums where there are discussions, or it might be wise for you to write them down and send them in. And that way they will be able to be considered and addressed. Now, while we're on this topic, I think a good segue is the fact that March 13th, remember the date, it's local government elections. We got to have accountability. This town, Georgetown, that we're in, the capital city, the only cleaning up that has taken place has been driven by His Excellency. The President and his cabinet and the business community combined to have Georgetown and its environs be placed in a better state, to be cleaner and to be more conducive to a capital city. The mayor, regrettably, is a failure at doing this. The city council is a failure at doing this. This is why we got to have local government elections. We've got to have people who go in to these offices and who will serve the people, who will ensure that the drains are cleaned and the grass is cut, and that all what was done in a few weekends under the guidance of His Excellency, under the direction of His Excellency, the President and his cabinet, was to demonstrate in a few short weekends what could be achieved. Now, the mayor and city council should be doing this on a full-time basis. And they're an absolute failure at this. And this is why we must have local government elections. We have to put people into City Hall that actually has the interest of the people of Georgetown at heart and will actually do the job that they're supposed to do. So I want to encourage you all, remember March 13th, local government elections. But if you've been following that about local government elections, you will notice that I think it's the AFC issued a statement that they're not contesting the elections. And then other members of the AFC said they were contesting the elections. APNU wants to say that they're contesting the elections upon conditions. I didn't bother to find out what the conditions were. But let me say this. I believe Vice President Jagdeo said it in much more forceful terms. The gist of which is this. No one in the leadership of the AFC or APNU can lecture anyone on democracy, can hold themselves out to be any paragons or defenders of democracy, having regard to what they did in election 2020. Now, it also demonstrates that there is no leadership in the opposition. You can't have a leader and you have one position yes, one position no. Where are you going exactly with that? And then you can't have a leader where Are you going it together as APNU AFC? Are you going it apart as AFC on their own and APNU on their own? Where are we going? And what are your... There are people who support the opposition. What are your supporters to think? That is what an absence of leadership is. A vacuum at the level of leadership is dangerous. Now, we should look and try to compare what happens when there is leadership. Firstly, when there is leadership, we can see that the city and the marshalling of resources to clean up not only Georgetown, across the country is possible. With leadership, it is possible. What else is possible with leadership? I think that it should not be brushed over, and it cannot be overemphasized, that when Guyana is chosen by National Geographic as to one of the top 35 destinations on planet Earth, that is as a result of leadership. Because it is where the country is. It is a reflection of leadership. That Guyana would be a destination recommended by National Geographic of the 35 places you should go on planet Earth. Little old Guyana has made that list. And credit to all who are responsible for that. Now, what is leadership? You may or may not have noticed that the gender gap report is out. And Guyana has moved up from 53rd on that list, and we're now 35. We've reversed the 5-3. From 53, we are now 35. How did we manage that? This is a direct result of leadership and the inclusive practices and policies as it relates to women and vulnerable people. That's the only way that if you read the report, you will realize these are the things that they focus on. And for Guyana to make that leap, it is certainly a credit to leadership. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is why leadership matters. It matters because that's how the nation, by doing the little movements, move forward. But that's how the nation itself is recognized. That's how other people around the world view Guyana and see Guyana. And that's why leadership matters. Which is why it is so dangerous that in opposition, there is a vacuum in leadership. And you couldn't make this up, really. I don't know how many people saw simple, I think it was a press conference with the leader of the opposition. And he made a very bold statement that the polls show, or a poll showed, that APNU is in the lead. Now, this was a secret poll. Apparently, a secret poll from a source that could not be disclosed. What nonsense. We all know how polls work. Polls work by speaking to the nation, if it's in relation to the leadership and the political leadership. You try to speak to as many people as you can in the nation to find out their views. Who do you support? There can be no secret about that. You can't secretly find out the views of an entire nation. How could that be? It's preposterous to suggest. Utterly, utterly ridiculous. And so this secret poll came from a source that could not be disclosed. by an organization that is unknown, could not be disclosed, and the leadership of the opposition, the leader of the opposition, refers to this poll but would give no details except to say it is secret. And his source is confidential and secret. I don't know where everyone else stands on it, but I call lie. This cannot be so. It is preposterous to suggest that there is a poll that is secret and a poll that comes from a source. These sorts of things, my humble view, I can't believe that. I just cannot believe that that would be the occasion. If someone were to come and prove me wrong, I stand corrected. I will respect that. But based on that exchange and based on saying that it is secret, cannot be accepted. Does not pass the test. Simple and straight. Does not. Now, we then go to the whole thing about knowing about the elections, constant comments are coming back again from people in opposition about knowing who won the election or not. Up to now, we still have not seen the opposition produce any record. We don't have to have statement of polls apparently, but the statement of polls, if they had that showed they won, it would be useful that we see it. It would be helpful. It would be persuasive. People might start believing what is being said. But even if you don't have that, any information would do at this stage. Because it has been proven time and time by a recount, and a recount, all of that happened. And we still hold on to these things. It becomes very difficult to accept anything that is being said. Anything that is being said. But we have that, be that as it may. Don't be fooled and don't drop your guard about the level to which outrageous stories are going to come and outrageous claims are going to follow in the coming weeks and months leading up to the local government elections. You should get your sources of news from reputable sources and not be misled by much of what is spread by the keyboard puppets that seem to take great pleasure in misleading people. Again, we must recognize that an election is upcoming and it's political season. So there will be some of that. But every citizen should, for themselves, discern what is truth from what is fiction and get your information from a place that is a reputable news source. Now, the last issue that I want to touch on is a little bit to do with how are we going to approach the coming periods. Now, we know that there's been a registration exercise, there are claims and objections. There are going to be other periods of this that will come up before the local government elections. And I know that their comrades are trying to mobilize and get persons involved, make sure they're registered, make sure all of these things. Now, I want to suggest to everybody, with an election in March 13, it may seem a long way away, but you should take it upon yourself as your own responsibility to find out where it is you vote, to find out which polling station, where it's located. I know that those polling stations have not been actually identified yet. That will happen much closer to the election, but you should stay tuned in and stay focused that you need to find out these are your responsibilities. And you should do your very best to find out where it is you have to vote and what you have to do in the lead up. Whether you need to do any additional things, you're going to hear from time to time from comrades who will be sharing information, but you need to also pay attention for yourself. Now, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you again for allowing me into your homes, and whether you're viewing us on television, whether you're viewing us on social media or listening to us on the radio, I thank you for being here. I thank you for joining me for the Thursday agenda. I hope that it has gone some way to discuss some of the issues that are presently engaging the public attention, and I hope it has cleared up some things for you. To all of you, thank you. We will be back again, same time, same place, next week, same time, Thursdays, 8 o'clock. That's where it is. And good night to all of you, and may your God be with you. Good night.